Hello and welcome to Gracefully Embracing Chaos, brought to you by McKinsey Corporation. We're here with Jenny Dinnan and Katie Rucker, co-owners of McKinsey Corporation. Our topic today is going to be strategic foresight. So this is a concept that we've been focused a lot on lately, and Jenny and Katie, you both have been big advocates and really excited about the topic. And one of the things I think that is challenging is expressing and explaining to others what that means, what it entails, and then also what it doesn't mean and what it doesn't entail. So I want to dig a little bit deeper into this idea of strategic foresight. And so it's not exactly predicting the future, but it does involve thinking about the future and what it might look like. Can you expand on this a little bit? Let's start with Jenny.
Yeah, we were introduced to this, I guess, body of work. I think we've been doing this for a long time at McKinsey, but now actually putting some rigor and process around this. So strategic foresight is really a way of planning for the future. And it can be done obviously for your business, personal, whatnot, but it's a way of taking a look at where do we want to be in the future, of what are the possibilities be out there, and having a more proactive, I mean, we can get into the details, but I'd say have a more proactive approach for how we're going to interact with the future. A lot of times, I'll just kind of say, and then pass over to Kate, but a lot of times people just say, well, it is what it is in the future, and this is where we're going to be, and it's kind of that push of this is what's happening, and this is where we're going to go in the future. Strategic foresight puts us more in the driver's seat to say, given what's happening, where do we want to be and how can we best position ourselves and our business for the future of what we want to be doing. So more proactively, I'll say, planning for different possibilities in the future. I don't know if that simplified it or not. Kate's good at simplifying even more.
No, I think that is, exactly what it would be. And really for me, a lot of it started to click actually during this time that we're in right now with COVID, of saying, gosh, I never would have expected this. But you know what, I think that if X number of years back and really started like tuning in again on the scanning of what's happening out in the world around us, not just locally, but globally. And again, it's integrating this in with our market mapping services that we're doing, is then taking all that information that we're scanning and then actually planning out, okay, if it went, there's three different worlds that they talk about in this strategic foresight concept, with it being transformational or abundance, the market world, or the fortress. And so it can be a positive, most likely to happen, or a negative approach, and really actually following those paths out to be able to say, what would the world look like there? And then again, like Jenny said, how did we then start intentionally planning now for the possibility of what it could be? Just helps you be a little bit more prepared. And for us, it's also just making us super excited. And again, Jenny has been really into this for a long time. I went through an accelerator program last week with it, and really getting us thinking about just all different, things that happen and happening around us now. What's the future of education? What's the future of housing? What's the future of, human potential, leadership, just different types of things. And just realizing that we have more control about the future than we probably sometimes think. And it's exciting to be able to be kind of as a part of a planning process for ourselves, for McKinsey. It's and as well as working with our clients to be able to help them plan more intentionally for the future.
And Jenny, you had mentioned that we do a lot of this stuff already, which we do. And when you get into kind of the tactical approach of strategic foresight, a lot of the pieces start to break down into things that we've been doing, for the past 35 years. And so where were you first introduced to this concept of strategic foresight, and what stood out or what jumped out that got you so excited about it?
Yeah, I think I'm always out there scanning and looking. I think I was by nature doing it. So I heard about KEDGE in the Future School last year, and I think through LinkedIn or some sort of article popped up there. So then last November, I went through the same class with Kate, or the certificate class of this 3-day accelerator put on by KEDGE, and it's their future school. The thing that I loved the best was on the very first day, you have to fill out, my name is Jenny. I mean, you have to fill out this, there's got to be a better way to blank. And there's got to be a better way of making changes within organizations. There's got to be a better way of educating our children. There's got to be, and I started realizing and being surrounded by other people that are like, how do we think differently? How can we be doing things differently? It changed my entire mindset. And when I got introduced to it and I started reading more about it and getting introduced to it, and then it opened my world to see we don't have to be doing things the exact same the way that we've always been doing it, you know? And I think that the more we started learning and doing, we started realizing that's what we're doing at McKinsey. I mean, from day one, we are curious, we're asking questions, and we're just thinking differently than the average bear. And so it's been ingrained in us from day one. I mean, Dad starting our business was saying, how can we be doing this differently? And now realizing there's an entire body of work or an entire industry that does this on a grander scale. How are we designing playgrounds for kids? How are we designing products based on looking at a new way of doing things? So I just got sucked in, and I'm so excited about being here. I will say, and Kate said, even through the pandemic and a lot of things, right now the world is very, very complicated. And I think that we're trying to solve all these, and they call them wicked problems. And a wicked problem is you try and solve this problem, but then it actually opens up like 5 more problems, you know? And so it's a complex. And part of our issue is that we're trying to solve these problems with old ways of thinking, of old systems to do things. We have to flip everything on its head to say, maybe we got to look at it from a different lens, a different angle. So it's exciting that this, I think, is a way that my brain, at least, and now Kate's brain has always worked. But being from a data analytical process oriented type of company, we've now put rigor and processes around it instead of just, let's just sit in a room and dream about the future. Now there's a very systematic way of doing that, which that's what I love to finally clicked together of what was going on here. Yeah, I could talk for days about just, I love all of
it. Kate, you had mentioned that you just recently went through a program. What stood out to you? What had you the most excited?
You know, I think for me, again, I work really obviously more on the operations side of things. I work in structure. It's just how my brain ticks. Well, Jenny's is really in that big idea. So then when she kept talking about it, I was like, that's just kind of in a way too big for me. Like I needed to know that there was this framework. So when I actually spoke with the people who put the program together as a part of the interview process to get into the cohort, they really were talking about the fact that there's like a repeatable process that you can be doing. And that like really helped click for me. And then the part that then got exciting as we can think about, or as we're scanning to understand what the trends are that are happening now. Obviously, if it's a trend now, it's not predicting the future. That's really just telling us what's going to be happening in the next year or so. Then you start, they talk about suspending disbelief. So then you assume then that these things actually already happened, even if they haven't yet. Then we say, okay, if these things happened, then what would happen next? And it really, again, it's this brainstorming way, but it being able to process through a flow. And I just thought it was really neat in that. One thing that too is just making these minor tweaks in the way that you think about things. So they were talking, one example was talking about the future of consumer behavior. And they said, before we can actually think about the consumer behavior, we should ask the question, what is the future of consumption and how people are going to consume and what people will consume? Then we think about what behaviors will go around that. And so instead of starting one spot, and so it, again, is that concept of thinking big and thinking broader than, again, I would normally think. And I think it's just exciting to be able to challenge ourselves and challenge our clients to be able to shift that way of thinking, but understanding not maybe all organizations are going to be set up to think about, potential transformative change. And so for us, it's then going to be finding the right types of clients who are excited about being able to embrace some of the findings that we can co-create with them.
And I think just having seen and being on the audience side when you both talk about it, and Kate, you had touched on it, it is a really big concept. And a lot of times when you're more on the ground level, either within a brand or trying to just get a grip or a handle on what all of this means, it can be challenging because it's such a big concept. So if we can for a moment, kind of trying to bring it back down to earth, so to say, and imagine where we'd put the rubber to the road and say, for example, a hypothetical. We've got a client who is a retail brand in the outdoor and adventure space. They offer products for camping or for fishing or something. They came to us, and based on all of the variables that are changing and shifting and how complicated and different consumers are today than they were 6, 8, 10 months ago, they're interested in strategic foresight because they heard you talking about it. Where would you have them start?
One of the things that, sorry, I'm jumping. One of the things that I've actually, since really digging in on this and thinking about the huge abundance of the amount of people going out into the outdoors now, the RVs and the, going out to the national parks. I think they were saying Yellowstone had like 40% more people there in the month of September than they've ever had before. And thinking about more and more people going out, which is awesome for the industry today. And you can start making different kinds of plans around the influx of consumers today. But I actually started thinking, I said, now we have all these new people who maybe don't understand, the impact that they can actually have, the footprint that they're making in these national parks, and what could be the ramification in 10 years. Are we going to speed up kind of any sort of environmental issues that, well, right now we're thinking, we've done a great job on environmental issues because we don't have as many cars on the road, but now we have more people going out into these natural environments and what's going to happen there. And so thinking back about even just one thing is just more around the future of learning and education itself. Like, how can a brand today be making sure that these new consumers are being, that they have the tools and resources to be able to understand how they can reduce the impact that they're making out there. So again, not even thinking about the product that they sell, but thinking about the environment in which people use their products and making sure that they're thinking long-term of what potentially the impact of having this many more people and how can they educate people today. So that's kind of just more of like, that's not actually about what they would be able to do for their products, but thinking about if there's issues in the environment in which people use their products in 10 years, what can they do now to reduce that? So that's
but Kate, to your point, it's interesting thinking from a brand development or marketing standpoint is you could take that concept and based on strategic foresight, look and say, they're going to have an influx of people who are going to be out there in 10 years. What's that going to do to the environment? Mm-hmm. And today say, hey, for every tent and sleeping bag we sell, we're going to donate $5 to a education program, or we're going to start to build our own outdoor education program. And so when you identify something like that, you can not necessarily say we're going to change how we create or sell this, but you can start incorporating those concepts into your strategy and into your plans today because you've thought about we're going to get ahead of something that we're seeing a trend right now. And so it's not predicting the future, but it's considering what's happening today to then plan and identify opportunities for the future.
Yeah, and it's thinking bigger too, right? So it's not just about the product that you make or the service that you offer. It's actually then how does that interact with your local community, the next, like your national community, and then the global community? How does it interact with the environment versus economics versus this? So looking at all these different avenues and scanning all of that, and just to be able to remind us, and that's something else that we get passionate about, that we're not, none of us are here by ourselves in this journey, right? And so it's how, as a person and as a brand, how are we also interacting with all stakeholders and making sure that what we're doing is looking at the lens of saying what's going to help the generations to come as well in a positive way, and how can we think bigger than just, again, the product or service that we offer.
Jenny, what do you think? Where would a brand start if they're looking to launch a strategic foresight project?
Right. I mean, we've got a whole kind of process that goes through. One of the very first things, and Kate kind of touched on it, is in the scanning process and looking macro, really what this is doing. And so it's backing up a whole bunch. So typically what happens in, let's plan for next year is that we're going to take our strategic or take our budget from this year. We're going to save as for next year. We're going to add in a couple different trends, and we're going to say, this is what we're going to do next year. And it's very narrowly focused. We're going to, and we're just going to look down, like we're going to make incremental changes to our product. We're going to sell X number of products, and we're going to do these things. And and we're going to mitigate as much risk as possible. that makes an organization a lot more fragile, because if anything were to happen, a global pandemic or a shortage of this or a disruptor comes in, well, wait a second, this is our plan. This is what we're doing going forward. What we're suggesting is we want to make companies more resilient, and we want to open up the lens to say, so the first step is saying, where do our customers live? What's happening in the environment? What's going on in the world? Socially, what's happening? How do we open this up? And then our product can live anywhere along these possibilities of the future. And so there's a lot of different possibilities. So if we're going down this road and wait, that didn't happen, something happened, great. We've already planned and we know that we can pivot over here and we're talking about this now or this. So it's opening up this possibility. And I think it creates a deeper relationship with your consumers. It opens up to say, we don't only sell XYZ product, we can also be using our product for the at-home moms and the people at work or at the offices and this and this. So we want to open up the world. So where do you start? You start in the macro scanning environment to say, what's happening in the world? Like, get out of sitting at your desk with just your spreadsheets, not that we don't love them, but get out and talk to people, see what's happening in the world, see what's happening in industries outside of your own. You should not just be saying, what is our direct competitors doing? What are our indirect competitors doing? What are people in different industries doing? What are people on the other side of the world doing? Like, open up your mindset, and that then creates this whole world of opportunities, which then sets up your business to be a lot more resilient. I mean, McKinsey, throughout this entire process, we're pivoting and growing up the service offerings that we're doing, and we feel good about it. We feel very in control about where we are and what we're doing because we've been planning for multiple futures. What happens, and we're currently, I mean, I have to go down the path, but we're currently doing a future of customer insights projects. What happens around data trust and about different pieces and different players in the game? Like, we've played out all these scenarios to know which way we're going. So depending on what happens, we're set up and we already have game plans for each one of those. We have our, the one that we want to have happen, which is great. And then, but we've also looked at what's probable, possible, whatnot. So it makes us feel a lot more in control and like a much more resilient company coming out.
You had touched on the direct and indirect competitors trying to take a step back and look outside of what we would have copied and pasted from last year and say that this is our group of competitors. Here's who we're focused on. I think looking personally as a consumer, there's a phrase that I like is habits are hard to break and they're hard to make. And so when you throughout the past, while we're all at home, we've broken habits and we've made new habits just based out of necessity and based on being forced into these market conditions that were totally unexpected and were unprecedented and unlike anything that we've ever come across. And so I think a brand now in my life as a consumer, the indirect competitors are totally crossed and mixed up in a way that they've never been before. And so when I have, say, free time and I have the opportunity of what would have been a group of indirect competitors, now you've incorporated 6, 7, 8 new concepts, 8 new activities, 8 new things that for a brand who doesn't take a step back and look and consider who I am or who you are as consumers or who the average consumer is and how their life has changed, then moving forward, you're still not going to be seeing this potential threat or this disruptor because you're so hyper-focused on what has always been. You're not considering what might be or what is or what could be.
Right. Going deeper, of like, if you're only looking at just your product and what's happening and how they're using your product and not realizing that their entire environment has changed, it's just, you're going to miss the boat. I mean, companies that are going to succeed in the future will understand their customers deeper. They will understand the entire environment that's happening and they'll be able to pivot for them. So I think a really big thing, because we've talked about it before, is strategic foresight is not just sitting back and planning for the future, but it's what are we doing today to proactively move towards the futures that we want them to be. Yeah. I mean, I think it's an interesting, it's such an exciting time, I'd say, for companies to be able to dig in and understand what's going on and play a key active role in the new relationship. If we're going backwards of what happened before, and we think that customers, B2B, B2C, any of those are going to go back, to your point, to those habits from before, that's kind of a recipe for disaster.
Yeah. I think, sorry, just really quick, one point even on that, and as you're digging in about a little bit more, one of the other things that I really appreciate is, as you're understanding the consumers, it's actually not looking at the actions that they're doing or what they're buying, but what is then like the next layer down, or as Jenny says, dig deeper. What are the values that is what's really driving certain types of things? Like when you were just talking about that, I just tried mountain biking for the first time ever. I didn't think in my mid 40s I'd be trying that, but really and that was never on radar. So I never would have been a mountain biking, but I'm like all in, would love to go every day because I thought it was super fun, super scary. But what the underlying value is, I get supercharged up by big, scary challenges. And so if I've like done this and like kind of like reached the max on like, okay, I'm not scared of that anymore. What's the next thing? Because that just charges me. It helps me believe that I can like do more things than I thought I could. Just all different kinds of things. And so I think then it's like understanding like what makes somebody tick and what those core values are, and then planning that, as you're future planning, you're planning around those value systems of the consumers versus just like, what is their action today? Because your products may have to morph and change, but you're still, helping to bring that value to life or embrace that value of your consumer. So it's just kind of a different thing to think about too, as a way to like dig deeper into like why somebody would be doing something, not just what they're doing.
I think an interesting thing too is, we keep talking about customer behavior and whatnot. That's a lot around that social piece. But if we come back to the steep of social, technology, environmental, economic, political, a big thing too. And obviously, we're right. So in full disclosure, we're doing this at the end of October. So it's right before the election, which will have a really big impact. But it's not just the national election and with the president. Every company needs to be taking a look at what's policy changes that are affecting their industry. In our space, there's one of the props on there about with CCPA and data security and what's going on. Like, we also need to be aware of not just what are the consumers doing, but what economic, politically, regulations, all of these type of things have an impact of our business. So the great thing about this project is it pulls you all the way back to see everything that's affecting our consumers and what they're doing. It's not just that there's new apps and everybody's shopping online. It also has to do with all of these different pieces. So there's just so many things that affect it that we need to be taking a look at. And obviously then once you have all of those, then you say, okay, what will have the biggest impact? Because then there's probability and impact to our business of where to focus, but it just puts you more in control. I think I keep saying that, but more in control of the future. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So to wrap things up, if someone's watching and listening and saying, wow, I want to know more about this concept of strategic foresight, obviously reach out to us because we have two experts who are super excited and would want to talk to you further about it. What's a resource or a website or an author? Where would you recommend they go to start learning a little bit more about strategic foresight?
Yeah, I think the Future School is definitely one that you can start following and being able to get some things. And I think once you get into there, then you start finding, that's what Jenny said, then you start finding different futurists who are out there. There's every like big company's got, not every, but a lot of different large companies have futurists on their staff and are doing different types of things. And I think being able to follow and understand what some of those, organizations or futurists are doing. So I think just being able to, I think even starting with the Future School is a great place to start.
Yeah, but for sure, the Future School and Kedge. And the biggest thing is just start scanning, taking a look at things. There's so much in there, and it's not just them. There's a lot of different programs out there, obviously, that we've both been through and certified and whatnot from them. But it's opening your eyes to new possibilities, scanning things, looking at news sources that you or articles that are coming in that might be different than what you're thinking. A big part of this, which we didn't talk about because we can talk for days, is our unconscious bias of we believe that this is the way it is. And so this is what's going to happen. So then we read news that goes down this way. The whole social dilemma thing is an entirely different conversation. But look for things that are different than what you would normally be looking for. Look at ideas that are kind of crazy out there and say, well, what's actually underneath of it? Start scanning, going, doing. So there's so much out there that it's really exciting. And one thing I love about Frank and Yvette, who run the Kedge and Future School, is they're all about, they say, democratizing the future, and that we need an entire new generation of people thinking differently for us to get out of some of these wicked problems that we were talking about, of complex issues that are happening. We need to be thinking about things differently, and we need more people thinking this way. So I love that they're all about democratizing the future and getting as much futurists as possible, and starting with that next generation of all of us doing this. So yeah, we can put kind of different in the show notes or something, but opportunities and resources out there. Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you. You've got me super jazzed up about the future, and absolutely just the conversations that we've had and that you've introduced to our team at McKinsey is it gets everybody thinking differently, and it gets you thinking not only about our company, our individual efforts in our careers and our personal lives, but then also looking out and seeing what are other people doing. And it just provides that different lens to start considering the world around us and how we might be involved and what that might mean to our future. So thank you both. As always, it's been a pleasure chatting. We are Gracefully Embracing Chaos, brought to you by McKinsey Corporation. If you have an idea or a suggestion for a topic we can discuss next time, please leave a comment or reach out to us and let us know at mckenziecorp.com. We'll be back with more. Thanks so much for joining us.